nice holiday weekend. Mr. Peckins, could you do the roll call, please?
Gasson. Hauser.
Here.
Bixson.
Here.
Bachman.
Here.
Klauser.
Here.
Kenjuk.
Here.
Lloyd. Murphy.
Here.
Stone.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum. Would you please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Before we start on the public comment, for those of you in the audience and the hundreds of thousands watching at home, online, I'd like to take note that we have a new member on our Planning Commission, Laura Murphy, who was appointed, I think, last month via City Council, via the mayor, and so Ms. Murphy will be filling in the vacancy that we have had on the Planning Commission. I have known Laura for probably 20 years plus, and I have found her to be just an exceptional person, someone who is very much committed to public service and the community. I'll let Laura say a few things, maybe introduce yourself to the public and any highlights and other things that you've done for the city, and get familiar with us, okay?
Sure. Laura Murphy. I live over on Grigg Street, right by the Dairy Queen. Been in that house about 25 years. Came from Ferndale Street, so been in the city a pretty long time. I'm also on City Beautiful Commission. That's going into year 5, I think. And have just enjoyed really engaging with the community and seeing progress and good things happen, including the newest murals on the Kiwanis shelter. So very tangible, and I hope to have this similar experience here on Planning Commission. So thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome. And again, if you have any questions about the process or the procedures, please don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us on Planning Commission, Jeremy, or even Mr. Banda. And I'll say one other thing about Laura. She's probably going to be mad at me about this, but many of you may not know this, but Laura back in the day was a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier for the marathon. So this is, you are in the presence of greatness right here, representing our country in the marathon. So thank you, Laura. Okay, so let's move on to line item number 3, and that's public comment. Does anyone here have a comment that would like to make on an issue not on the agenda? If so, please step on up to the lectern. No one here. Rose, how about anyone online?
No one's online.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that being said, we will move on to line item number 4, and that's the approval of the minutes. Consideration of the minutes of the regular meeting of August 5th, 2024.
So moved.
Okay,
Support.
support by Mr. Bachman. Any discussion among the commissioners about the minutes? Looking at you, Laura. None? Okay. Mr. Peckins, roll call, please.
Hauser.
Yes.
Bixson.
Yes.
Bachman.
Yes.
Klauser.
Yes.
Kenjuk.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we're going to move on to a series of public hearings that we have this evening, okay? We'll start off with 5A. This is consideration of 114 East 4th Street. This is a request for modification of a previously approved site plan to adjust payment in lieu of parking requirements. This request to amend an existing site plan and recommendation for City Council. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Crott is online. We can't see his face. Can you minimize that? Jeff usually likes to be seen.
I'm here.
You're there. We're gonna, there you are. Okay.
Every attorney should be seen. So go ahead, Mr. Crott.
There's jokes about,
And usually heard. Good evening. Tonight, before you is a public hearing for the site plan revision request for 114 East 4th Street. If Planning Commission recalls, the only change to the site plan requested was how the 7 parking spaces that were needed would be satisfied. A few years ago, there was a payment in lieu agreement, and that was approved, and that was reflected in the site plan. And due to the acquisition of another off-street lot, they would like to satisfy 3 of the parking spaces required by use of that method. So the only change to the site plan would be the reflection of the meeting of the 7 parking space requirement, 4 by way of payment in lieu, and 3 by this other parking lot, which is within 300 feet. So what's before you is if you would conduct the public hearing, the Planning Commission was in favor of this. We would call it more of an administrative process, but to conduct the public hearing and to approve the amended site plan request. And one thing that I would like one of the conditions is I mentioned in the memo that there is an easement. There would need to be a permanent easement that would allow for the use of at least 3 parking spaces at the nearby lot for purposes of 114 East 4th Street. The easement in the packet is, I've reviewed it and worked on it with the attorney for the business, Boss Barber, this is. And I'm in favor of that form for recording. And so if Planning Commission does move it, that would be one of the conditions I'd request. The applicant would also need to go to City Council to ask City Council to amend the pay in lieu installment agreement to essentially say that the amount of money that they paid would satisfy the 4 parking spaces, and it would end that agreement due to the meeting of the other parking spaces in this fashion. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to discuss.
Mr. Croft, thank you very much. Commissioners, based on the statements from the city attorney, are there any questions, any concerns that you would like to discuss with Jeffrey?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a couple concerns. One's related to the ordinance. I think this is predicated on being 300 feet from the parking lot to the location. On the diagram, there's a hash line of 245 feet that goes through a structure. And so no pedestrian's going to actually travel along that line. They're going to walk north on East Street to 4th and then head west up to Boss Barber. And I don't know if those distances are more or less than 300 feet or if it matters.
Yeah, we did speak about that, city manager and I, when he did confirm the 300 feet. The ordinance doesn't require 300 pedestrian traffic distance. So without that requirement, that we were okay with, as I guess we'll call it, as the crow flies, because the ordinance does require within 300 feet property to property.
Okay, thank you. And I think we're still short on the monetary compensation to the city by half a parking space, $3,750. So are we going to recommend we just let that go?
It shouldn't be short. It's just pure numbers.
They paid for 3.5, and I think we're taking
essentially,
3.
Essentially, they paid 5 of the 10 payments. So to your point, that would be correct. That would be something that they would ask City Council to meet. Right now, the current parking requirement payment is $1,000 per space, and they were under the plan when it was $7,500 a space. So if they were to come in brand new today, they would have had to pay $7,000 instead of $52,500. So that's something that, due to the change in the price, there are no refunds or anything, but we would be in support of determining that $31,000, or I'm sorry, whatever the $26,250 would be sufficient to cover, but that would be ultimately up to City Council if they would be satisfied with that.
And is this a novel situation, this specific case? There's no precedent. So if we were to set this precedent, is it conceivable that other yet to be fully paid applicants under the $12,000 tier and the $7,500 tier may come forth? I mean, this seems like some clever arbitrage. So I tip my cap to the applicants here. Is there a concern from the city that there could be some meaningful revenue loss as a result of moving this
And
forward.
we don't do it to, if I may through the chair, we never set up the pay in lieu to create a pot of money. There was an ordinance that you had to follow if you couldn't provide the parking. We do not want people knocking buildings down to build a parking lot when they could pay, now that's why it's $1,000 instead of 12,500. So you'd have to buy a whole lot just to cover a few dollars. And this is one of the bigger ones, so we don't have many others. So there's not a concern that it's gonna open up a floodgate, because there's only two other ones, Tularoo, and there was one other one that paid in lieu, but not a concern for us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? No? Okay. Mr. Bannon, any concern on your part?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So it is 7:11. I am going to open up the public hearing. Anyone who has a comment or would like to make a statement about it, please come up to the lectern, okay? But I'm going to open up at 7:11. Rose, anyone online who has a comment on this issue?
No one online.
Okay, so at 7:11, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this. Commissioners, any comments? Any support, any?
I would make a motion to
Okay.
approve the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by the mayor. Is that consistent with the conditions set by city attorney? Okay. Is there support?
I'll support it.
Mr. Kenzick, support. Okay, any discussion amongst the council members or the commissioners? No? Okay, Mr. Peckins, the vote, please.
Hauser,
Yes.
Vixen,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, next is 5B, B as in boy. This is consideration of 1120 North Main Street. This is a request for modification to allow a previously approved site plan and special exception request to allow upper story residential units in the top floors of the proposed building. This is a request for site plan approval. Mr. City Manager.
So, tonight, we had a public hearing set for this
That's correct.
issue. We talked about last week. There's some concerns about how the structure fit into the area, if you will. The petition went back and made some modifications. I know, I've had a couple of calls. People are still thinking it's a very modern-looking building. Again, that's kind of in the eye of the beholder. Under site plan review, we technically, just for the record, we can't tell them what the building can look like, but we certainly can talk about it, trying to be compliant with the surrounding area. So Vidia brought that up at our last meeting the first time and talked about, it doesn't have to be a wooden structure like the ones next door. And if you look in the rendering at the far end on Second Street, there's a brick building with glass windows. I remember we talked about bookends possibly, so we'll let the architect talk a little bit about.
I think we've got the
I'm
wrong
sorry,
one.
am I on the wrong
That's
one?
okay, yeah, this is B. I was
I'm
like,
trying to sense it, Jason.
that's okay.
Okay.
We're
forget
gonna
all that.
start over.
Alexis. So let me
Yes.
introduce-
All right.
So Vidia's in India visiting her family with much needed rest, so Alexis has agreed to come in, and she's McKenna. Why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll go through the same process. Sorry. Okay, there you go.
Hi, my name is Alexis. You may remember me. I worked on the Parks and Recreation Plan last year with you all. I just wanted to come up here so I can share renderings and the plans if needed. So tonight we have several site plan considerations on the agenda, and the first is called L on Main at 1120 North Main Street. I'll reference our letter written by Vidia, which is included in your packets, dated August 25th, 2024. So I guess I'll just pull this up right now. So we have a visual.
It's a little ways down.
Is there someplace?
Once we get,
I've got page 49-ish or so,
Oh, okay, let's see.
38.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what
The
I was
first one,
thinking.
got
was
it.
that
There you
one.
go.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I screwed you up.
That's okay. Okay. So we've got this, and we've got this beautiful visual. So I'll just provide an overview, with this in mind. So For this site, the applicant is proposing to demolish an existing single-story structure and build this new 2.5-story mixed-use building with office space on the first floor and 3 townhome units on the second and third floors. The subject site is located on the northeast corner of North Main and Highland Avenue and is zoned O2 Restricted Office District. The site is currently occupied by a single-family residence or residential-style building that's being used as an office currently. It has a small parking lot to the east side of the site. For context, the applicant received approval from this commission in April 2023 for the construction of a similar version of this building, a 2-story professional office building. However, the applicant is returning for approval of this modified site plan in front of you tonight, which has reduced office space and additional residential units. So previously there was no residential component. Now, I understand that the applicant appeared before this commission on August 5th for preliminary review, and given that this plan was previously approved, the modifications do not significantly change the overall layout. I'm going to keep my presentation brief, but I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. So the only main item of note in our review is the sustainability evaluation on page 3 of our review letter. Like all new projects, this proposal was evaluated under your sustainability scoring system, and it scored a 14, which is 1 point under what is considered sustainable. Now, even though it scored a 14, our recommendation is that this is still a sustainable project, and we wanted to note that it scored full points on indicators for environmental health, mobility, and fiscal strength. And while it is not within the DDA boundaries, it is close enough that it will support downtown businesses and contribute to walkability. The affordable housing baseline in this evaluation is something that I understand Vidya has talked with the commission and staff about, that it needs to be revisited. And my understanding is that most or all projects tend to score a 0 on that affordability component. So we just wanted to note that that evaluation mechanism needs to be revisited, and that this is not necessarily scoring way under what most projects do. It's just that it's about baseline compared to other projects. So for this one, our recommendation is that the Planning Commission approve the proposal, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, commissioners, any questions for the city planner? No, I will just say that I was on the board that came up with the sustainability. It was probably, what, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. It probably isn't a bad idea to sit down and kind of retool it just a little bit to get it caught up to speed. So I agree with you on that. There's probably some more changes we could make on that, so duly noted. Okay, Mr. Bain, any questions from you?
Nope, maybe just if the petitioner wants to say
Yeah.
anything, and then we'll open the public hearing.
Sure, of course. Is the petitioner here? And if so, would you like to step up to the lectern, please? Good evening, sir. How you doing?
Good evening.
Name and address for the record.
Sure, Mark Abernatha with Alexander Bogarts, the architects, 2445 Franklin Road, Bloomfield Hills. The petitioner, Damiano DiMercurio, is here with Deluso, as well as our president of our company, Xander Bogarts. As I mentioned in our last meeting, we're very excited about the project. We think when we initially brought it to the community as all office, we thought that the office demand was going to be a little bit different than it is. So we decided to pivot and go to residential and reduce the amount of office. We think now that the project is right where it needs to be in terms of meeting market demand. We're providing 3 luxury units that we think are going to really help the community from the standpoint of providing more households in the community, walkable to downtown, that type of thing. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but we're looking forward to moving the project forward.
Mark, thank you. Commissioners, any questions? No? Okay. All right, so that being said, it is 7:20 PM. I'm going to open up the public comment, same as before, the public hearing. And if you have any comments or questions or concerns or anything that you'd like to talk about this project, just come on up to the lectern, okay? So at 7:20, I'm going to open it up. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Your name and address for the record, please.
Dr. Erica Grunwald, 125 Highland Avenue.
Doctor, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you for hearing me. I have three objections to this project.
Sure.
Which I'm gonna make, and then you can discuss or whatever you wanna do. The first thing I wanna say is at the last planning commission meeting, which I watched online, the question was proposed by one of you about whether or not this project matches the vision of our city. And that question was not actually answered. And so I would love to know the answer to that question definitively, because I would disagree that this project matches the vision of our city. So that's the first thing I would like to say. The other thing I would like to say is, we have codes for building for a reason. And why are we not going to hold them to the standard of what we have the codes for? The current code, as I understand it, is 2 stories. So why would we allow this project to change that? We have family homes being built right across the street from this project, potential project, that are to the current code. If this is the road you decide to go and make exceptions to the current code, where do we go from there? You know, is this all up and down Main Street? Because these buildings are all up and down this part of Main Street that they can all of a sudden turn into multifamily homes. I have a house 5 doors down from me. Can we tear that down and become a multifamily home? There are just similar sized properties. I just feel like this precedent is potentially set. This piece of land is not much bigger than the land that the parcels are on Highland Avenue, and you're potentially putting 3 families on it. That's a big difference from what is going on in our neighborhood. And finally, I purchased my home because it was next to a business, and I knew that would be a relatively quiet neighbor, which it is, and it's great business. And even when this was proposed as an office, I didn't want the construction next to my home because who does? But at the same time, I was like, well, it's still an office, no biggie, right? But now we're talking about potentially 3 homes in the size of not much bigger than my space. I feel like it decreases the value of my home, and it decreases the value of my neighborhood in general. So I just wanted to be heard, and I appreciate your hearing me.
You're very welcome, and you always have a right to be heard, okay? Thank you. Any other comments that anyone from the public would like to make? Rose, is there anyone online who would like to
No
make?
one online. No online.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna close the public comment or public hearing at 7:23, but I guess, Mr. Banda, or to the city planner, obviously I have some questions based on the comments, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, okay? So there's zero confusion. So I'm going to start backwards here a little bit. With respect to the codes and the height restrictions, if anything, can you give us any explanation and clarification on that point, please?
So office zone, you can have 2.5 stories, so this is 2.5 stories by definition.
Okay, so let's back up for just a second. So this area that we're talking about.
Zoned office.
It's zoned office.
Correct.
Okay,
It's not the same as single family.
okay, so
it's
this
gotta be-
area. Hold on. So
It's gotta
this,
be built to a R1 district, so R1 is 2.5 stories, so this meets the standard of 2.5 stories.
okay, so because this is zoned office, the height restriction allows it to go 2.5 stories, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and this does not exceed 2.5 stories, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. With respect to office and having mixed with residential, can you explain to the commissioners and obviously to the public as well why that is permitted?
Sure, so in that district all along, in Rochester, in the office district, they've always had special exception for upper story apartments. It's a mixed use. The new zoning, master plan considered mixed use as a good thing. That's the next progression in how cities are building things. This has, it's self-parked. They have a single-family home. So I understand the concern. I'm not belittling that, but they have their own parking lot. It's a commercial building. It happens to have 3 units, but they have their own parking on site. So you couldn't do this anywhere in a mid-neighborhood. It'd have to be zoned multiple families. So the neighborhood's zoned single family. This, again, has a separate zoning classification. All along Main Street, from town all the way to the city border, this could happen. You could have 2.5 stories, mixed use. That's actually was contemplated in the master plan and supported. So not everybody's going to agree to a master plan change, but it's always been in the ordinance that way.
And just to be clear, and I'm saying this just out loud so for everyone. So this doesn't create a precedent. This is already an existing thing that planning commission can do.
Correct.
Okay. And then the third question I have, and I'm kind of working backwards from what the doctor had brought up, is the question at the last meeting was, does this match the vision of our city? And I want to make certain that we're providing an answer to the residents and all people who come up here. And so if either of you can opine on that, that would be helpful.
All I can say is the vision is set by planning commission and city council. So we are the keepers of the code. The code allows for this, encourages this. It is a special exception. They have to meet certain standards in the special exception, or the planner wouldn't recommend that for approval. They do meet all those standards. And again, it's not zoned single family. If it was, we wouldn't have this conversation, but it's a buffer zone. In traditional zoning, you'll have more intense uses on the main thoroughfares, and then you work your way back down. Office is quite a not intense use. The next steps there could have been commercial, and as you know, there's B1 and CBD commercial districts until we get basically to Woodward. The office starts at that transition point from the restaurants on Main Street. So
North of the gas station there.
Yeah, this is pretty typical transitional zoning. So vision for the city, that's in everybody's mind, has a different vision possibly, but the master plan was vetted twice in the last 10 years and never took out the opportunity for upper story apartments. Okay. But they also did not raise it to 3 stories. So this had to meet that threshold of 2.5 stories. It's a formula based on the square footage of the 3rd floor. So it's 3 floors, but not stories.
And I think to answer the doctor's questions about if this could be done on your street, and the answer would be no, because residential, you can't have office.
You have 2.5 stories, but 25
Right.
feet only.
Right.
So.
And it's single family.
Single family too, yes, correct. Okay. Thank you very much for the clarifications. To that end, are there any questions or comments by the commissioners that would like to be asked at this time? Ms. Murphy, anything? Jessica, no?
A couple from me, maybe?
Please, go right ahead.
Excuse me. Maybe for the applicant, I believe that this is intended to be luxury townhomes, and so likely the intent is to own. Any expectation of leases or rentals that might potentially be a concern for the residents on Highland?
I would ask that to respond, if you want to come up to the lectern though, just so we can make sure you're on the record.
Good evening. Damiano De Mercurio, 1120 North Main Street, Rochester, Michigan.
Good evening.
Our goal here is to have a luxury, high-end for-sale product, a condominium. Any other questions?
Nope, that answers that. I do have a question related to the parking lot. That may be of interest to Dr. Grimewald, given her concerns. So I think we're outside of requirements. I think there's a required 10-foot setback on Highland. And according to McKenna's report, looks like there's parking spaces 2.5 to 4.5 feet from the street.
I can help with that. So that's what was approved originally. They went to the zoning board of appeals, were granted the waiver, and that waiver runs with the land, so that's already been taken care of.
Right, so that back when this was first going to be just strictly commercial, they went to zoning, and zoning gave them that variance to have that within that 10-foot buffer. So that continues on.
Yeah, the trade-off was they'd have
Yeah,
hedges so
the
high
edges,
to make sure
right.
they didn't block the parking lots. So
Yeah.
that was negotiated with the.
And that's still gonna remain consistent in this? Okay. Irrespective of whether it's mixed use or strictly commercial? Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. So, that being said, obviously, public hearing having taken place, questions and answers being asked by the commissioners. Is there a motion to support the site plan and special exception approval? I'm sorry, did I say something?
Close the public hearing.
I did.
You did.
Yep. If I didn't, I'll do it again. I'll close at 7:30, but I think the record will reflect it's been done. That's okay. That being said, looking now for a motion to request a modification for the previously approved site plan and special exception. Okay.
So you're looking for a motion up here.
Motion up here, yeah.
I will make a motion to approve the site plan for the change in the site plan.
All right, is there support?
Support.
Richard supports. Okay, discussion among the commissioners.
Yeah, so I,
But Mr. Mayor, go right ahead.
yeah, so I'd just like to, in response, yes, of course, I don't live right next door, so that's gonna be unpleasant. We all do that. I do live in the neighborhood, and the building next to it, the Morgan Stanley building, I think fits in okay, in my opinion. And the question you brought up, the doctor you brought up about setting a precedent, it does not set a precedent. You couldn't do a place like that anywhere in our neighborhood. So, that's why I feel comfortable letting that go.
And, Doctor, to be clear, the reason I was asking those questions the way I did is because I wanted to make sure that you had the answers to those questions. And there's a difference between getting the answers and hearing them versus not necessarily liking them. But I just wanted to make sure that you understood that I was listening, that we were all listening, and your issues were being responded to the best way that we could. And I have every reason to believe that the applicant's going to be a wonderful neighbor, and they're going to make sure that you're happy and you've got everything that you've got going for you. Nothing's going to be disturbed. Isn't that right, applicant? Okay, all right.
And no Airbnbs.
And no Airbnbs, that's exactly right. So, okay, that being said, we have a motion by the mayor, we have support by Richard. Any discussion among the commissioners? Okay, Mr. Peckins, a roll call, please.
Hauser,
Yes.
Bixson,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, and best of luck to you, okay? Doctor, thank you for coming to the public comment section, okay? Public hearing section. Okay, Nick, now's your time to shine.
Sorry,
This
sorry.
is section 5C. Hang on a second, let me put it out there. This is consideration of 339 East Street. This is a request for site plan approval for a 3-story mixed-use development. Retail on the first floor and offices use on top 2 floors at the former site of the Moon River Soap Company. This is the request for site plan approval and payment in lieu of parking. Mr. City Manager.
So I apologize for
Take
jumping
two.
ahead there. Take two. Again, so this was before you initially, our last meeting setting for public hearing, which we did for this evening. The discussion really focused about more the appearance of the building, and again, in site plan approval at the planning commission, we don't have, design guidelines, but we negotiate, we talk, try to, with the, petitioner, there are guidelines in the zoning arts that talks about compatibility with, within the DDA area. And again, in this rendering, if you look to your left, you can see the Mitzelfeld building, the brick building with the glass windows. I think the architect had spoke at the last meeting where they're trying to find that middle edge between that building, making it a bookend on this end of the building, this end of the street. So obviously, if you go up towards Main Street, those are basically 1.5, 2-story little buildings that are more traditional, that were like the Moon River Soap building that was there previously. So again, dialogue with the petitioner, they changed the colors. It was a little more stark white, more contemporary, I think, the first time we saw it. So I think a dialogue with them and maybe have them explain a little bit what the thought process was to add the windows, more windows, and come up with this project. And we talked about trying to soften along Third Street with the planter. They've done that with the inset. So this rendering pretty much reflects that, but Alexis can go through our report.
Alexis, how you doing?
I'm well. Can you hear me in this
I
one?
can hear you very well. Go right ahead.
All right, so for this site, the applicant proposes to construct a new 3-story building with a restaurant on the first floor and office space on the 2 upper stories. The site is located on the southwest corner of East Street and East 4th Street and was previously occupied by the Moon River Soap, which has since been demolished. The site's located in the Central Business District, and I understand that this proposal was also before you at the August 5th meeting for preliminary approval. The applicant has since revised the site plan to address most of the concerns brought up at that meeting. However, there are a few items of note that I'll bring up, which are in our which is in our reference letter in your packet dated August 26, 2024. So there was concern raised in the previous meeting over the location of the nearby parking lot, which the applicant is seeking to go through the payment in lieu of the parking spaces, and there is a very nearby municipal parking lot, but there is a concern over barrier-free and ADA spaces and the location of those. And so our recommendation is that the applicant work with the city manager and DPW on the feasibility of relocating one of those barrier-free parking spaces within the municipal parking lot so that there's one also on the northeast corner. So that's one note. And then moving forward, there is some clarification needed regarding grease waste disposal. So for the use of a restaurant, this is something that we found within the application that we needed clarity, and it's something that can be reviewed administratively if they submit information following the approval. Next, the applicant has revised their architectural elevations to include rectangular shaped brick designs. So let's see, we included some examples in our review letter on page 2. So for this one, we are just unclear on if these rectangles will have a different color or brick pattern. We recommend that they incorporate some sort of pattern to give it some additional interest and increase the design of it, but we also requested that they bring additional information on this tonight, so we'll see if they have something to share regarding this. Additionally, the revised plans, as Nick noted, have incorporated the row of wooden planters abutting the windows along the north facade. The grade at the frontage slopes down from the west to the east, and the proposed planter is intended to be raised from grade to window height. With those, we note that the planters must be planted with landscaping, so something seasonal, evergreen, that provides vegetative cover year-round. And then lastly, we note that the applicant must submit signage information for administrative review. So for this, our recommendation is that the Planning Commission approve the proposal on the following conditions: that the applicant work with the city manager and DPW regarding the feasibility of relocating a barrier-free space to address parking concerns, that the Planning Commission make the recommendation and City Council approve the payment in lieu of 30 parking spaces, additional information or clarification on the grease waste disposal, Planning Commission approval on the proposed building architecture with the incorporation of this brick architectural pattern along the western facade, installation of the planter, as you can see here, which will be planted with year-round vegetation, and again, submission for signage for administrative review. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Alexis, thank you. Mr. Bandit, do you want to add something?
I do. So this was an interesting ask. It started off, we all assumed we would see a mixed use of retail, maybe one floor of office and a condo above it. Kind of that's what Moon River, they had their apartments. Liz and Carlos lived above there at the time. initially, we were a little shocked with 30 parking spaces pay in lieu. Again, we're not in this to make money. That's not the point of it. So the thought was if you had 2 floors of residential and they're each just 1 unit, then you'd need 5 parking spaces versus the office demand. And then talking with the petitioner about this, again, it was, anybody that would buy a residential unit in a downtown is gonna require private parking. So one of the things they asked was, would you be able to take lots in your parking structure, or, I'm sorry, spaces in your parking structure, or in the lot adjacent to the south, and dedicate those for the residential units? Many, many people have asked that in the mixed uses throughout town. We've taken that to the Parking Advisory Committee, and the answer was we cannot pick and choose winners who gets to take a space. They're willing to pay in perpetuity for that space at $10 a day. And again, it wasn't about the financial gains that the city might get. It was the right thing to do. That is public parking. It was set up for public parking. So then the question was, is 30 too many? So if this was 3 floors of restaurant that were open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, staff and the planner would have had a different recommendation. That would be a big ask. During the day, and we're very cognizant of this, and if Mr. Knapp, if you're watching this on TV, Mr. Knapp owns some of the buildings on Main Street where the restaurants are. And when 4 or 5 o'clock hits, this lot is extremely used due to the Chop House and due to the O'Connors and all the good things that happen on Main Street there. So the worry is, how can you give up 30 parking spaces at night? Well, the answer is, it was retail on the first floor before when Moon River was here. This is a restaurant with alcohol. It's 4 more spaces than retail, not a big ask. So when the offices are closed in the evening, they're not putting any burden whatsoever on that parking lot. Even if they were residential there and they had guests, they would probably put a bigger burden, than not being open for 2 floors. The fact that across the street is our east parking structure. That structure is the least used parking area in the city for some reason. In the winter, it gets more parking because on the belly, you can park and be out of the elements. But with that exposed upper floor, it's not as used as other decks. Certainly, there's 30 spaces there all day long, double or triple that in that deck. So we were comfortable with, at this location, being office during the day and the small eatery on the first floor, that we could support the 30 parking space waiver. So just wanted to know some background. We thought of all that and had that dialogue. Again, Moon River they are grandfathered in for 10 spaces that someone bought years ago. And they had a little driveway in the back, if you could remember. That's where they parked their 2 cars tandem when they lived upstairs, because they couldn't be guaranteed a spot in that parking structure or into the lot next door. Staff is also in support of moving the handicap space there. It's better used there for this building or anybody else downtown. It's easier to get to the sidewalk. So we are in support of actually doing that. They would pay to have it restriped, and we can live with that. So with that, maybe the petitioner could talk about the changes they made, and staff is in support, as Alexis said, of this request.
Quick question before the petitioner comes up. Can you tell me, or tell the commissioners, what's the largest number of parking pay in lieu that we've done?
I think, Glenn, you have the record, right?
67?
67, yeah.
Okay, so.
At the Roxy.
Right, so we've done 67, and then below that, would this kind of be second? Okay.
And again, with the Roxy, it was proximity to the west parking structure. And that will drive the clients there. Same thing here. And again, the tenants here could buy $20 a month parking passes. And so it's not unfeasible that it's affordable to be able to park in a public lot. They could go to the farmer's market lot and park for free also. So again, we had those discussions with the developer to say, you sure you want to make sure you're deficient? You have 0 parking. So we had that dialogue, and we both agreed it would be feasible.
But you can't park all night though at the.
Correct.
So if you're residential, you couldn't park there.
That's
Right.
true also, yep.
And is there any issue with respect to that parking structure once the elevator starts and gets occupied across the
Because
street?
they have their own parking on site and residential parking, and they have the overflow across the street.
Okay.
At what call the elevator lot.
All right.
So.
I just want to make sure that, so everyone who's watching and listening understands. Okay, commissioners, any other quick questions? Otherwise, we'll have the applicant come on up.
I just had a quick question.
Ms. Murphy, go right ahead.
Because trying to understand how things like this operate in in town. There's a lot of people who come to Rochester to work. Many of them, wait staff and what have you. Do they all buy a pass at the garage?
So the reason when we started in the beginning at 12,500, for pay in lieu, people weren't doing the development process. City Council's made it very clear, once we set that $20 fee, we have never raised that. And we just talked today, with Attorney Crott, and we were talking about in Birmingham, a monthly parking pass is like $120 to $160. Ferndale's the closest to us. They're 30 or 25 a month. Other communities are $40 to $60. So if you worked a 40-hour shift in Rochester and you bought a parking pass, it's 83 cents a day to park. You can't get it any cheaper than that. So it's probably 50-50. Some businesses actually pay for the passes for their employees, especially the restaurants do. Some offices also do that. Some people buy them on their own. We have residents that buy a pass knowing that if they're not able to walk to downtown, they'll buy a $20 pass so they can go to one of 4 places. You can buy a pass exclusively for the east deck or exclusively for the west deck or the east side parking surface lots or the west side. You cannot buy a pass for street parking. So we kept that at just the meters, even though you can use parking passes in metered lots, but not on the streets. So that's the convenient parking. So we do have a myriad of people that, you're right, come in here and if you go by the parking lots, like 9:30, the free parking lots, so the, behind Firestone, by the elevator lot, and then the farmer's market lot, those get filled up pretty much with folks that want to do that. In fact, people use what we call the Home Depot lot down by the bridge, under the bridge. They'll park there and walk up. They use City Hall's Lot 10 here and walk to town. So different things for different folks. Some people don't mind walking around, but in the winter, the decks get used more because 3 of the levels total are covered. So people find they'll get that pass by the month. So you have to buy 3 months at a time. So a lot of people will just do it for the winter and then let it pass and they'll take a walk in the summer. So hope that helps.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? No? Okay, is the applicant here? And if so, would you come up to the lectern, please?
Good evening. My name is Paolo Longo. I live 1012 Knob Creek Drive, Rochester.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, Benny. Okay, go right ahead, sir.
As it was said, we changed a few things on the building. We had the flower boxes. As a concern about the bricks, the shapes of the bricks on that west corner. Those are, different, design of the bricks. And we had some limestone more on a belt all the way around. And about the grease trap, we have a company, I'm part owner of the Silver Spoon also. And we have a company, it's called Dover Grease Trap, and they come and they take all the grease from the grease traps and they take it with them, even oil was used, they take it with them. So there's no discharge in any public places. Yeah.
Okay.
Paul, can you talk a little bit about the inspiration for the look of the building?
Well, we tried to, come out with a design that was not too modern, the color of the brick, to follow the Rochester area. We toned down the metal part, which is an aluminum composite, just to break it up with the brick, we call it like a rusty color, just to not to, be too, how to say it, yeah. So that's what we did, and we try to put as many windows just to get, a nice look of the building, all the windows on the bottom, they're open, and they will be open in the summertime for a restaurant. So it'll be, like an indoor-outdoor seating. We think that the building looks great. I mean, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't present it, but.
Mr. Bennett, go right ahead.
If I may, so surprisingly, when the 329, I think it's called Workspace, happened on Main Street, Greens was really hard to see inside. You could stare and look at. Now you see the activity inside the building. We get more comments about how lively that's brought some airiness and some activity to downtown. Even though there's a wall there of windows, seeing people in their offices, certainly the first floor restaurant. Again, this isn't Main Street, I get that, but when you look at the other end, you have the traditional square little windows and you don't know what's going on in there. So there, again, it's in the eye of the beholder. It's functionally better light for energy efficiency, et cetera. And it does add a sense of activity on that corner. Again, this is what I'm gonna call the Water Street redevelopment area. Eventually, you're gonna see both sides of the street, not our parking lot, but on the south side, fill in and probably add second stories. And you would think the more you can get activity to liven it up a little bit, not a bad idea. So, again, we thought it fit into the concept of not being too boxy, and adding the brick instead of just the metal, I think softened it a bit. Again, you could pick up a little bit of Lidl's and you pick up a little bit of Mr. Feld's building at the far end. So that was kind of our take on it. And again, not everybody's gonna agree, we understand that.
Just to add on too, we had some balconies which is unusual for office space, which I think they look nice, and breaks it up too.
Yeah, it doesn't have that monolithic approach to it. Mr. Bennett, for my edification, right across the street, so where I'm standing, if I'm looking, would I be at the elevator project?
No, at the east deck.
That's at the east deck. Okay, so I'm standing at the east deck right there.
So the east deck is basically open, obviously, but bands
Yes.
of brick. that
Yes,
match
that's right.
this.
It's
So-
one street over. Yeah.
Correct, one
Okay.
street.
Silver Jewelers. right
Yes,
there.
yes,
Exactly,
yes, yes.
so, yep.
Okay. And then the Mills
Yep.
is straight down the street there.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
No.
No. Any questions? Mr. Bachman?
Just a question related to McKenna's recommendation of a pattern brick design. So Chief Cieslik, last meeting, he brought up, I think, what everyone found was very valuable related to what is required for fire standards, given the proximity of the wall to the other building. And I think the average person might not think of that and just wonder why we have this, as you, the term you use, monolithic wall. And so I think a pattern brick design would be kind of a lovely touch. And so I wonder, as the applicant, would you commit to that? Could we put that in our?
It's in the plans.
Yeah,
if
they
it-
did.
Oh,
do
you
that.
did? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes.
It's okay.
Did I miss that?
Just to add a comment to that, keep in mind, in the future, if the buildings to the west of his were decided would build, they would be required to put up a same type of a brick wall. So all of that detail that they're having there would probably be hidden against the wall. Rightly so, it's there to be seen today, and there is no guarantee that it would ever be developed to the west. But if it was developed to the west, that wall, those two walls would be butting up against one another, and all of that would be hidden.
Different patterns there.
Yeah.
Okay, so simplistic pattern, not something as charming as herringbone, for example.
Well, I mean, that's just a design, but it can be changed and adjusted of an herringbone or anything, it's just an architectural, I guess, just to show that there's a different design in there, but we can commit to that, that's not a problem.
I mean, just personally, I think it would bring a lot of charm to the building, and to Chief Cieslik's point, it could be completely covered up by a new building in the future. And so I wondered, since we have such a large space with those parking lots as you're heading north on Water Street, if we added a similar element to where, you couldn't put windows because of the elevator shaft and the bathroom, just to kind of make it a sort of cohesive, thoughtful, charming design on both, I think it's the south elevation and the west elevation. As an idea, and I wonder if you would be amenable to that, and if we should incorporate something along those lines into a motion.
Yes.
Okay. Duly noted, yeah, and so let's take that up for consideration. Let me do this. If we don't have any more questions from the applicant, I will say thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up the public hearing, so let's do the public hearing, and then presuming no comments or questions, then we'll come back to us and have that discussion with respect to motion, okay? All right, so I'm going to, at 7:54, open up the public hearing. This is for 339 East Street, and this is for their request for site plan approval. So anyone who has a comment or would like to make a statement about this particular project, please come on up to the lectern. Oh. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good. Bob DiTomaso, 426 West University in Rochester. The only comment I have came about when he said the first floor windows would be operational to get an indoor-outdoor feel. I just make a note that you probably want to look at a sliding window because a swing-out awning kind of window would get into the sidewalk space. But that's the only thing I had to comment on.
Thank you, sir.
Unless he's got the clearance for it to begin with. So.
All right. We'll ask. Thank you very much. Appreciate you, Bob. Okay. Any other comments? Rose, anyone online?
No one's online.
Okay. So at 7:55, I will close the public hearing and then open it up to conversations or questions, comments by the commissioners. Okay. So is there any comments? Obviously, Mr. Bachman noted about your motion with respect to the detailing of the brick, correct the exterior. Any other comments or questions? Now's your time. Jessica.
So the payment in lieu of 30 parking spots feels meaningful to me. I wasn't on the planning commission, I don't think, when the Roxy came through. But 30 feels meaningful. I think it's hard to judge, but I do worry that kind of the equity and fairness to other developments and businesses. I think, 30 spots in one location might be okay, but as the chief mentioned, if all the buildings on that west side start to develop, can we afford 30 spots for all of them, for example? And I think, maintaining consistent standards as much as possible really ensures that, the development of that area proceeds in a balanced and fair way, and that's my comment.
No, I get it.
30 feels meaningful.
Mr. Banda.
And that's fair. That's a fair thought, and that's what we went through ourselves. So I'll say this, so for up until the parking management district, which is, I think in 2014, Mayor, anybody on Main Street from bridge to bridge required 0 parking. It didn't matter what you put in there. You could put a restaurant with 1,000 tenants in there and you were required 0 parking. Over the years, the city and the DDA teamed up to buy lots for the public to use. For years, it was free parking everywhere, just meters on the Main Street. So it was a big step for us to go to talk about monetizing all the lots. Our study, so we know every day, every hour, how many spots are open. So if at any time we think there's a certain area that's getting wrapped up, for instance, we knew we had some problems buying Cruise and Mir for years, so we negotiated a lease with the Masonic Temple that they never used their parking, like once a month maybe. So we rented spaces there, monetized it so that we could, again, provide extra parking. So our evaluation of the use, and we can't speak to the future, you're right, but now we are under what we projected, which was 38% parking during the day. So we're under that even. Lucky for the city and our parking fund that we're overused in the evening, and that helps balance that out. So again, because this is office, we're not as concerned. If this was a full-on 3-story retailer, I think we would have a different thought. Now, the bad news is, the answer would be, they have the right to build something there. Do you want them to build a postage-style building with a little teeny parking lot that you'd have a hard time getting to? We don't want them to buy the buildings to the north of them, tear them down to put a surface lot. That's the biggest worry. So if you don't have a vehicle to provide less parking, you're encouraging tearing down buildings to build more parking. So I don't know if that helps at all, but it's, again, because it's a lesser use, less intense use, we were okay with this. If it would have been a more intense use, we would not have been okay with this.
Any other follow-up on that?
My other comments on just
ahead.
the design of the building, I do think it's really modern. I know Nick said it's all in the eye of the beholder, and I would disagree. I do feel like it's very modern. I think it doesn't really do anything to preserve or enhance kind of the traditional character that really defines downtown. I think especially in this part of downtown, I think it's hard on this street with all those colorful bungalows that it's up against. I also, think about the building that was there previously, and that had a very unique charm with its bright green and the colorful windows and the green space around it. And I think it's important to maintain that uniqueness and the character and those unique buildings, and this doesn't replace that. To me, the design just doesn't feel congruent with the neighboring area and buildings, and I worry about public sentiment and if this aligns with, the vision to really maintain that cohesion downtown.
Please, go right ahead. Get it out.
So,
Get it out.
if I was them, I would've took a picture shooting north, and you're looking at a parking structure, a brick. That was the toughest one for the community to swallow. We were putting up a brick parking structure, but we put a lot of limestone, we put the towers up, so you would see this perspective of this building looking north to the deck. This matches that area perfect, and that takes up half a block. So, again, not a reach, too far of a reach because of what's across the street, and it's way deeper than this is. It's all the way up to the alley. So that would have helped them if they would have had a perspective that you could have seen that. It might make you see it, think it a little bit differently. So, you could Google Earth it, but again, I'm not trying to change your mind at all. I'm just making a comment.
Thank you. Any other follow-up?
Those are my comments.
Mr. Mayor, go right ahead.
Yeah, so, obviously, I think we want to have a building there. I love the concept and things. At the last meeting, I said, it just seems too big and too stark. I don't remember what word I used. And so we asked for some changes, and you made some changes. But those changes didn't really change it that much, in my opinion. And again, I know it's in the eye of the beholder. So I would love to see you come back and try something different. And I think the community, it's going to be a shock to the community when they see that going in down there. And I think if we don't change it, I think the community is not going to be overly excited about it. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Richard, or?
No, sir.
No, sir. Okay. Mr. Bachman, any comments other than what you've made?
Yep.
Thank you. Laura, you're good? Okay. This is a struggle because if you look at the building itself proper without anything else, it's absolutely something I can appreciate and value, and I'm like, this is a beautiful, beautiful structure. The concern, and I share with my colleagues here, and I've heard it from a couple other people, I've gotten a couple emails about it, is that is this the right building for this particular spot? And that's the challenge that we've got, is how do we make sure that what we put here works cohesively with the existing structures, and at the same time, to Mr. Bandit's point, none of us have a crystal ball up here, and we can't tell you what that area is gonna look like in the future. We have an idea, we can have some, speculation, but those are all guesses. And the concern is that, and I think Mr. Mayor mentioned it, is once that building's there, it's there, and we kinda gotta work around it now, and it doesn't really conform with the buildings directly to the east of that. Now, I would agree, maybe some other pictures of different up and down, north, south, and maybe a little bit further west would be helpful, but man, and I also appreciate, Mr. Bennett, we can't say no because we don't like the style, is that correct? So this is not, we cannot just dislike it. It's not a basis to deny. Go ahead, Mr. Banda.
I want to.
Please, go right ahead.
And I'm not advocating either way.
I know you're not.
I want to be fair, so.
I know you're not.
Google Earth.
Please.
What's on the south side of the street.
Yeah.
Is a one-story traditional brick strip office building, and it's, so, again, in perspective, I understand what everybody's saying, because we all love Moon River Soaker. That's a gorgeous building. It was so unique.
Yeah.
So, Jeremy gets that, we'll show you, the other corners are as mundane as you can get. So just give us 1 second.
Take your time, and I appreciate you doing this because it helps us, kind of reconcile and.
Yeah, 'cause we don't take this lightly at all, and when we meet with developers right out of the gate, it's kind of like, hey, these are comments that are gonna come up because Moon River was there. And we were hoping somebody would rebuild it exactly like it was and make it the cool little place.
And I want to make sure the applicant understands that it's not just us. These are questions that we get, from the constituents, from the residents, and we have an obligation to raise those, so that's the only reason why we're doing this. And while you're doing that, Jeremy, no rush, okay? Take your time. Mr. Band, I just wanted to make sure that the 30 parking spots that we're talking about, this is something that's feasible and the city can handle?
100%, yes. Based on real data that we use for the parking lots, because again, they're all metered, so we know how many people use them there, so.
Would-
Right, so
would that-
there's,
would-
yep.
Then,
I'm just kidding.
Oh, good job, Jerry. So there's, all right, so that's to the north.
that pole?
No, I was
Oh,
just,
go
I
ahead.
was just, no, I was gonna say, does the parking in lieu have to go to city council?
If they could write a check for $30,000 and not go to city council. If they'd like a 10-year payment plan, it would have to go to city council. So that would be the north, across the street from here is our deck. And you can see we spent extra money on making that deck as palatable as possible, knowing that it was just a surface lot, but with the brick and the limestone, Jared, shoot
Oh,
around the other
Nick,
side.
can you turn your microphone on?
It is on.
Is it? Okay.
So across the street, keep going. So go down that street a little bit. There, that's the old building right there that Jessica was talking about. A lot of care, go, so we can just go down the street.
See,
Down
Mr.
East
Chairman, when I look at that, the parking garage and that building don't seem the same. The building seems a lot bigger. In my
Well, it
opinion,
was
in
3
my
stories,
opinion,
but yeah.
in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, no, I'm talking materials, yeah.
I agree.
Obviously, it's taller, but
Sorry, is the design, that's not brick, right? That's painted, like he said, it was like a rust color, right? That's not, that's brick and steel we're seeing, right? And limestone on the bottom?
Brick and aluminum composite, it's called.
the gray is aluminum, but
So where's the brick? Where am I seeing?
the tan color, all that.
The
yeah.
banding.
Yeah,
That
Jared-
is gonna be brick?
Yeah.
That's the aluminum.
That's,
That brown part?
The aluminum.
The column on the right side.
The grays, yeah.
Oh, I see where the doors are, right? Yep. Okay, that makes sense,
Right,
yeah.
Jared,
I
flip
just-
around, so you're on,
Brown part.
looking at the other side of the street. Yeah, now go down that street. Yeah. Now turn that way. Okay, there you, nope, the other way. So that's what's across the street. So not traditional, other than when traditional Rochester buildings, somebody a long time ago allowed, 1.5, 2-story brick buildings with siding and pretty standard.
Not this planning commission.
Correct.
We did not do that.
But, and that's on the other corner. And again, that's when they first came in, looking at the whole area, and then a dead space parking lot in between, so. Just for perspective, that's all. Thanks, Chair.
Is there anything, thank you, Jeremy, is there anything that we could do, or the applicant can do to maybe, I guess it would be on the north-south street, is that Water Street?
Water and.
East, I'm sorry, east. There's planters on Fourth there, but anything on that side to soften up that, you're right on the property line there. Yeah.
The architect would have to answer that.
Yeah.
Paulo.
I think that this sidewalk was
It's wider.
a lot wider because
Wider.
this has that green band. And
Sure.
this one currently had no green band, and that's why they had that space for that planter, with
Okay.
still having a regulation sidewalk.
All right. So, Mr. Bana, can you explain?
Well, there'd have to be a motion. right?
Yeah, exactly. So our options are, we make a motion to go forward with this, or otherwise there is no motion. Is that right?
You have to take action, and the ordinance requires you to take some type of action, either for or against, but, I'm sorry to do this to the developer, but if you didn't like this, then you would say the property's too intense, you would want something smaller with their own parking on it, and you would deny the 30 parking space waiver, and then they'd have to come back and either park on their own site or make a smaller building that's something, bring it in smaller so that you could change it. I mean, that's a backdoor way to do it, but legally, we can do that, to say, we are not in support, if it's too big a building on the site, which should only be 2 stories, so you don't need 30 parking spaces, you only need 15 waivers, so there's ways to do it if you were not comfortable, but we do not want to deny it based on the look of the building.
No, of course, we can't, and that's not an option, that's fine. So let me ask you a question though, realistically, how feasible is it to have a building with its own parking at that site?
Virtually impossible.
Right. Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I didn't hear that, so.
I said Boss Barber bought that parking lot that was within the same space, that would have been possible.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because you could have built your own building and again, be 300 feet away and buy it like Boss Barber did,
Right,
but that was already sold.
but that's gone.
And then maybe you could put residential where the people have their own parking, but there's nothing else available there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have a quick question. When it was Moon River, was there parking all the way,
No, they just had two little tandem spaces in the back for their apartment, but they had no parking for the site.
no street parking on that whole
Neither corner.
corner?
And that's because they didn't need it, because they were grandfathered in for the parking, yeah, so they didn't have to have.
They didn't have to,
They didn't have to,
but now this does.
Correct.
okay. So, to my colleagues, you've heard what Mr. Banda has to say, and I guess I will leave it up to, we have to take some action, all right? So the action is either we approve the motion, or we make a motion to approve it, or alternatively, we say it's too intrusive.
Or you could
Or too
postpone it.
intense?
You could table it to see if they wanted to come back with a different look.
You could table it, or it could be too intense, and this would have to go, and they'd have to put parking on its own. So those are really the three options.
So I would make a.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I would make a motion to table this and give the applicants a chance to work with the city administration. You've heard what we've all said to try to, I mean, as I said, I support you guys being there and having some building. It's just hard to support this building and the intensity, and then because of that, then the parking issue, I want to be careful how I say it.
No, I understand.
So that'd be my motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by the mayor to table this in order for the applicant to work further with city administration to see if there's some modifications that can be made based on what was set up here. Did I say that correctly, Mr. Manda?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
And that's okay to do that.
and that's permissible, okay.
Support.
Support, okay, Mr. Bachman, support. Any discussion amongst the commissioners?
Could I ask one question?
You can ask anything you'd like.
Ask Attorney Crowd, are you comfortable with the path we're going down?
Yeah, if the applicant is amenable and wants to give it a try, but if they're just gonna come back, with the same exact plan next time, then I'm not sure why you would table it.
Yeah, we are missing three commissioners also, and that could, if you're counting
Could sway
votes, that could sway it, so it might not be a bad idea to have full commission here either way.
I think there's,
Which is an option available to the applicant. They could ask the table to have a full panel.
you know, and it's probably worth mentioning is that there's three other people who were not here this evening, and each one of those people might have a different perspective than those sitting up here at the dais. So, I guess maybe, do we want to ask the applicant what he would like to do? Mr. Applicant, would you like to come up to the lectern, please? Okay. You've heard the comments and the temperature in the room. Is there anything that you would like, do you have a particular?
At this point, no, I gotta be honest with you, because it won't, if we shrink the building is only 40 by 60.
Right.
It's not, it might look huge, but it's not that big. It won't make any sense, to shrink the building.
And I don't know if we're necessarily looking to shrink it. I think it's more of the exterior, like the look, you know, is that something?
Flat roof, it's hard to do anything else
Yeah.
with the flat roof. I mean, we try to, you know, like I say, incorporate balconies and put as much windows we could, match the brick. I don't think what else, I mean, I don't see what else could we do, to be honest.
Okay, hold on one second, Ms. Clauser.
To address the intensity, did I hear you say, Mr. Banda, that if the office buildings were residential, they would need less parking spots?
Yeah, it depends how
Is
many
that-
units, but it's only 2 per unit versus offices, 1 for every 200 square feet. So it would be less parking required if it was residential.
So there are some flexibilities or options.
The
to
only
get
problem
to
is then
less
they don't have,
intense.
like the mayor said, you can't park overnight in the parking
Right.
structure of the lots, so where would they park for residential? That was that's why Moon River had their own 2 little spaces tucked in the back of the building, so. It's this game you have to play with
Give and
residential.
take.
Yeah.
Okay, so applicant, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is it your position that if we gave you more time, it's likely you still wouldn't come back with anything substantively different than what's presented here?
We'll have to talk to them.
Yeah, Yeah.
My partner, I mean, obviously, probably not. I mean, like I said, it wouldn't, shrinking the building, that's the only solution. There would be making them less massive.
Right.
Like I said, it's only 40 by 60, so there's not as much square footage in there to put a restaurant if you shrink it too much.
No, I get it. The price per square foot.
No sense whatsoever to put a building in.
I appreciate that. And again, maybe I'm hearing something different from my colleagues, but I don't know if it's necessarily a size issue. I just think it's a style issue, in relation to what's around there. I think that's probably from the aesthetic point of view. And again, I think it's a beautiful building. I think the concern, at least on my own part, is that it may not be the right building for that particular location. But again, I want to make sure, number one, we're not doing anything out of sequence or out of line. So I guess Mr. Kratt, or maybe Mr. Banda through Mr. Kratt, any guidance that you could provide us so we make sure we're doing the right thing is greatly appreciated.
Well,
go ahead.
The commission has the ability to table it if they would like to table it for further consideration, and to have the other planning commission. I mean, this is only, I think this is the first public hearing date, so it's not like you're stringing the project out unnecessarily. But if more consideration is needed, then a tabling would be appropriate.
Okay. So based on that, and Mr. Mayor, I think you made a motion to table that, I think, and Mr. Bachman saying, I think maybe that might be the proper course of conduct, is to table this for two reasons. One is to make certain that the next time you come up, we have all 9 commissioners here, number one. Number two, it provides you an opportunity to maybe talk with city administration just a little bit to see if there's some minor modifications that you could do to address some of these issues. And I'll defer those conversations to you guys, but I think right now that would seem the most prudent thing to me. And I appreciate the fact that you're here and you don't necessarily want to change a lot of things, but I think big picture, it might be in everyone's best interest. Is that okay, Mr. Banda? Mr. Chaplin? Okay. All right. So just to be clear, we have a motion by the mayor to table, support by Mr. Bachman. Any discussion amongst the commissioners?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to say, hopefully, I think we all support having this building here. Just maybe there's a way to work with the city manager to make it feel like it fits into the area. And then if it does that, then I think then we're more willing to do the parking and things like that.
I completely agree. This is not a no, other than we just want maybe a little more conversation, and we frankly want our colleagues to be able to talk about this as well. So something we want to go there should be good for everyone, okay? All right, so that being said, Mr. Peckins, roll call, please.
Hauser.
Yes.
Vixen.
Yes.
Bachman.
Yes.
Clauser.
Yes.
Kenjuk.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And then reach out to Mr. Banda this week and we'll get this back on track, okay? Thank you. All right, line item 5D. This is consideration of 415 Walnut Avenue. This is a request for site plan approval for the former School of Rock building for conversion to a gathering space on the first floor, along with special exception request to allow for upper story apartments on the second floor. This is the request for site plan approval. Mr. City Manager, Nick Banda.
Turn this right over to Alexis. We had our first discussion. There were some perspective questions. I think this will address those. That it looks like that gray wall, if you remember, was flat and it was kind of boring, but it's really actually stepped back and there's landscaping in front of it. So if Alexis could go through the report. I will note that the parking lot's been redone, resealed, redone. I think the dumpster closure was well on the way of being finished. So all the obligations that were made previously have been taken care of now. So that happened since the last meeting. So I just want to go on the record for that.
Alexis, you're up.
Thank you. All right, so as was said, this is a proposal to reoccupy and make some changes to an existing building. This is directly adjacent to what I'm told is a very popular theater, the Roxy, and they are the ones that are looking to utilize this space on the first floor for private gatherings. I've been told by Vidya that through conversations with the applicant, they have been approached to have private parties, birthday parties, a space to host gatherings before folks walk over to the theater. So this is in support of that existing use on the adjacent property. So to start off, there are a few notes throughout our review letter, which I will reference from your packets dated August 26, 2024. The first being about access and circulation. So there were a few inconsistencies on the site plan that we know we'd like to see changed. So the access off of Pine Street is noted on the plans as two-way. This was previously approved through the approval of the Roxy as a one-way, and we want that noted on the final site plans, that it must be restricted for exit only. Both access drives are shared for this structure with the existing building where the Roxy is at. We just request that a copy of the shared access agreement between the two sites be submitted for records. And then continuing on discussing parking, I think it was noted that this may have been one of the larger sites, the Roxy, where there was a larger number of parking waivers. So I'd like to note that our letter states that there was a payment in lieu approved for 71 parking spaces. It sounds like maybe it was actually 67 or a different number, so I just wanted to note that. And that for the gathering space and the apartment, the total required parking spaces is 14, including one handicap accessible space. The site plan provides a total of 9 parking spaces, including the one barrier-free accessible space with a 6-space shortfall. So this request and proposal includes a request for a payment in lieu of parking for 6 additional parking spaces. We also wanted to note that parking for the gathering space is based on occupancy load, and the applicant notes that this will be limited to 35 people. However, the cover letter that accompanied the submittal stated 25 to 40 people, and we just want it noted that occupancy must comply with the established number based on building and fire code. Additionally, at the preliminary hearing, which came before you earlier this last month, we're in September now, that this board had brought up that they'd like to see 2 parking spaces with signage dedicated to the apartment. We would also like this noted in the site plans. Next, Nick had mentioned the dumpster. Our understanding is that the dumpster enclosure, which was part of the approved site plans for the Roxy in 2022, has since been constructed. So initially they did not construct this enclosure, stating that they didn't need the dumpster. However, we, when you have an approved site plan, you have to build everything that you say you will. That has since been built, and it's located within the parking lot. It's built to what the specs were in the approved site plans from 2022. However, we would like a shared dumpster use agreement submitted just to have on record as part of the final submittal. As you can see in the photo here, there are a few facade changes that they are proposing. While this is sort of a rendering, we would like to see updated renderings to show any corrections from previous discrepancies. This is another thing that can be reviewed administratively after approval. Next is lighting. There are some existing floodlights on this building, and the plans noted that they are to remain. However, we recognize that this is directly abutting residential uses and it's in a residential area, and we would like to see these changed to shielded lights to comply with the ordinance. We, want to make sure that any there isn't flood into the neighboring properties. So, in conclusion, our recommendation is that this is an adaptive reuse project, which is a great fit for not only this directly adjacent use for the Roxy Theater, but it's within the downtown area and works as to support the existing successful theater. Our recommendation is that the Planning Commission grant site plan and special exception approval on the following conditions, which are in our letter. Correction to the site plan and designation of Pine Street Access Drive as exit only, submission of a copy of the recorded shared access agreement between the subject site and the abutting property to the south where the Roxy is located, Planning Commission recommendation and City Council approval of payment in lieu for 6 parking spaces, designation of 2 parking spaces for exclusive use by the apartment unit to meet the 2 parking space requirement for a residential unit, submission of the shared dumpster use agreement between the 2 properties, and removal of the existing floodlights and replacement with shielded wall-mounted fixtures. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any comments for Alexis, the city planner? Ms.
I have a
Murphy?
question, and maybe because it sounds like you've been here for this already, but the apartment that is above, is that like a long-term rental apartment, or is it?
I think Mr. Wilhelm knows the individual who's going to be renting that.
Okay.
My daughter's a student at OU, and she's going to be there.
Okay. Oh, go you.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay. Mr. Wilhelm, why don't you come on up and just tell the commissioners about the project? We've got a new commissioner, Laura Murphy, who I know would love to hear about this a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so this kind of came out of a need that I saw from the Roxy of groups of 25, 30 people that have bought suites and things like that at the Roxy, and we're looking for a place to gather prior to. I get a lot of phone calls, they were having problems getting reservations of groups of that size in the restaurants and things like that. The building became available. Because of the proximity to the Roxy, I didn't really want another use to go in there that might conflict with us and, have any neighboring issues and things like that. So, that's why we came up with the idea of using a gathering space on the first floor. Thought that was a natural fit for it. Close proximity, and I think it'll do well for us.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Have you, in regards to the parking and payment in lieu of parking, with the 60 or 71 spaces, have you, or maybe this is for chief or city manager, any issues with the parking for the Roxy during events or?
Sure. One of the things that we, when we first came to the planning commission about the Roxy, is that we anticipated most of our patrons were going to be dining out prior to coming to the Roxy. And we really found it's in excess of 80 to 85% of the customers that are coming to the Roxy are dining somewhere downtown prior to it. When we open our doors for the evening, many times I'm out in front welcoming people and things like that. And all I see is people coming down the alleys, coming from the restaurants on Main Street, or walking down from Cruise and Yours. They're really parking all over and then walking over there. I think people tend to park where they're going to eat and then walk to the Roxy. We haven't seen any issues, and I don't know if Mr. Manager got it. I know that we haven't had any complaints that I know of from the residents or for anything. It's just a very spread out parking rather than all congested.
Nick, could you talk about that?
Yeah, and I would concur that we had hoped that would really drive the parking structure, but then we were also worried, what if it's overwhelming the parking structure, other people want to use it, and again, we have pure data that we can see that it is a mix. They spread out all over. The East Deck actually has picked up a little bit of parking in the evening, and we don't know, we've talked to people too that have gone there, and because the restaurants they're eating at were on the east side, they park there, get their hour free, and then walk to the Roxy back. So we haven't had an issue with capacity or zero complaints about how it's all functioned. In fact, the DDA is looking at, I'm gonna call it gussying up the alley, the little pedestrian walkway between the back of the corner bar and the deck with those string lights and some art down there. So when you come out of the deck, or you come from Main Street, you can walk there and then go to the corner and across the street. So try to liven it up a little bit and lighten it up, but no issues for the city. And actually, we're pleased because it didn't overwhelm the deck, which we thought might happen. Now, when the Chapman House ever opens up again, and Glenn's aware of that, that would be another, we'd have to look at that again, but no issues at this point.
Thanks, that sounds like best case scenario.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Thanks a lot, Glenn. Appreciate it. Okay, so that being said, I am going to open up the public hearing at 8:30. If there's anyone who would like to make a comment about this, please come on up. State your name and address for the record, please. Sir, how are you?
Good. Alan Harris, 421 Pine Street, so I'm directly across the street from the Roxy. So this would directly impact our housing, so just in terms of floodlights, cannot happen. When the Roxy came into town, we were assured of soundproofing. So far, it's been good. So we haven't had any issues with parking. We haven't had any issues, you know, sort of when concert's over, basically things are good in terms of like the time. My concern, just in terms of learning about what the gathering space means, to me that means pre-party, after-party, right? So I would want to make sure the soundproofing extended to this new building. And to be quite honest, I think you guys recently put in arborvitae alongside the Roxy to extend that all the way, so it would cover reach to that pole. So that would, you know, give us some buffeting from our house, especially with lights and sounds. So that's, again, my comment as a resident, longtime, I've been there 20 years, my father owns the place. You know, I'm speaking on behalf of him tonight, so.
No, thank you. Okay. So a couple of things. You had mentioned floodlights. That would be bound by the same light ordinance that any.
Shielded. That's-
Shielded.
Video talked about take the floodlights off, put shields on them. So
Right.
that would address that, absolutely.
Okay, and I remember, Mr. Wellham, when you were here last time, if you want to come up and just, please, I want to make sure everyone understands what this use is and hours of operation and what you plan on doing there, so this resident and his father.
Sure, absolutely. So my intent with the lighting was to use the same shielded lighting that we have at the Roxy now, to match in that lighting.
Okay.
So I don't anticipate any problems. I'm very, cognizant and aware of the neighborhood, and I appreciate your, making the comment about the sound. That was something that was very important to us from the beginning, that we don't be a bad neighbor in the neighborhood. So, as far as the sound at this, place, it's significantly smaller than the Roxy. There's no bands, there's no, it's gonna be background music type of thing. It's not gonna be, there's gonna be no live entertainment, anything like that. And the, resident in the apartment above us has my cell number, and she will call. So, you know, I don't anticipate any issues with sound. You know, there might be, to your point, there might be some, it might be a pre-Roxy event party, it might be a post-Roxy event party. You know, we kind of go with the business of what it is, but I don't anticipate any issues with the neighbors at all.
If there is an issue, and this gentleman were to reach out to you, he knows how to get a hold of you?
Absolutely.
Okay, maybe afterwards you exchange numbers or something like that, just in case. Always talk to one another before you give a city a call, okay? Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that being said, thank you, Mr. Wellham. Any other comments, public hearing portion? Rose, anyone online?
No one's online.
Okay, so at 8:33, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this. Commissioners, any questions or comments or further action that you'd like to take? And I would be looking for, or the city would be looking for, a motion to approve the site plan approval to convert this to a gathering space.
And I would say subject to the planner's recommendations.
Subject.
And I will let planning commission know that when that takes place, before we will issue a building permit, they have to change the drawings, give us a final set, goes back to Vidia, Vidia signs off on them, and then we attach those to their permanent file, so we don't have words, we actually change the plans. That's what we did at the Roxy too, so.
Right.
And everything we do that now, we want to make sure we have signed off plans that meet all the conditions instead of having to look up what happened at the planning commission meeting, so, just so you know, we do that.
And just one other thing for the public and for new member Laura Murphy here is that when a site plan is approved, once everyone votes on this and gives us its thumbs up, and then the final drawings are then submitted to the city, and the city issues its building permit. That building must be built consistent with those approved drawings. If not, chief or some building inspector will come in, issue a stop work order, and then they either have to conform it, or alternatively, if they want to change something that's already been approved, they have to come back to us and ask for a modification to that site plan that's already been approved. No one gets to go build whatever they want to build here after they come to us. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that, so there's no questions, okay? Did I say that correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, that being said, is there a motion to approve the site plan approval to convert this to a gathering space?
I'll motion.
Okay, motion by Ms. Clauser,
with
subject
all
to the conditions
Yep.
of the planning
Yep.
department, yes? Is there support? Now's your time. Okay, Laura Murphy, coming out of the gate hot. Okay, all right, support by Laura Murphy. Okay, discussion, anyone? Okay, Mr. Peckins, the roll call, please.
Hauser,
Yes.
Bixson,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilhelm, good luck to you. Sir, thank you for coming in. Okay, all right, we're gonna move on to consideration, this is 6A. This is consideration of 107 East Second Street. This is a request for payment in lieu of parking requirements. This is a request to set a public hearing. Mr. Banda?
Thank you. So I know we keep saying pay in lieu, but it's working. I mean, the idea of the city council at the time, we dropped that from 12.5 to 7,500 to 1,000 was to spur some development within reason. Big ask at 30, obviously, and people weren't comfortable with that yet. So the idea is to give us a chance to have some adaptive reuse, as Alexis said, on some of these buildings. So in this case, quick background was Chillin was there at the, behind Chomp. So it was Chomp, Collective Studios Tattoo Parlor moved down to East Street, relocated, he needed more space. So Tim from Chomp took back the middle third of the building, and it's really cool if you have gone inside. He's redone the floors.
Oh, is it? Okay.
He's made the inside seating bigger, which worked out because it's just seating there with no alcohol, so he has enough parking without having to go to pay in lieu. If he ever comes back for alcohol in there, you would have to come back for pay in lieu. In this case, Chilling was owned by the building owner's wife, Dr. Haratzis. So Karina Haratzis ran that. It was just a little passion for her. She had bubble tea and different kinds of ice cream and stuff. It was kind of cool little place. Got bored, sold to a young lady that tried to do a different kind of, was it ice cream? Yeah, something, and that was in there, and she had some waffles and things like that. Again, just basically like carry out. So again, it was retail specifically. When this young man bought this to turn into the coffee shop, we told him, you can sell coffee out of there, but if you want tables and chairs, then you would be classified as a more intense use of a restaurant without alcohol, which requires 150 square feet per parking space. You're only grandfathered in for retail, which is 200, so you would be one space short. It seems like something minuscule, but we have to be consistent. So we read the ordinance, we classify the use, and he chose to open without tables and chairs. Unfortunately, they were kind of snuck in there, and we caught him and let him know, and he cooperated. We said, just, you need to go through the process, so take the tables and chairs out till you go through the process. So he submitted his site plans, his floor plans. Tonight, we're just asking to set the public hearing for next month. We'll have him here to explain what his use is, but he does want the tables and chairs, or possibly booths in there, and then he would meet the requirements of the parking for the site. They do have a couple of parking spaces, but they share that with Chomp that's behind off the alley. So again, the parking lot to the east is not very heavily used during the day, the big parking lot, the upper farmers market lot. So we are totally comfortable that one spot will not burden that parking lot.
And you're certain he's not using this now?
Correct.
Okay, because I saw a while ago he was.
He was.
That's kaput. Okay, all right, so we need a motion to set this for public hearing to allow this business to have one parking spot.
So moved.
There you go. Support?
Support.
Mr. Kenzik, any discussion? None? Mr. Peckins, the roll call, please.
Hauser,
Yes.
Bixson,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on, Mr. Banda, miscellaneous.
Thank you, Alexis, for filling
Thank
in
you.
there. Great job, as always, and look forward to that. We're trying to get to the zoning ordinance, and these meetings have been so jammed, we can't put them on these agendas. So we have the option, if you'd like, to start going back to 2 meetings a month in, we could do it later this month or October, November. If we need to get through a couple more of these districts so that we can get it to have the joint meeting with the city council where we explain what we're trying to get to. So next, we do not have a lot of, other than if we are back with the Moon River site, we have a light agenda, so we could use that agenda for that and see how it goes to get through those 2 districts. So we don't need an extra meeting this month. And if you decide at that meeting that we would like to set a second one for October, we could take a look at that. So that's basically all I have for miscellaneous. But if, with your approval, we'd like to put those districts on the next month.
I think that's a good idea. I know it's been discussed a lot, and I think it's time that we just have to step up and do it. And I think, absent any objection from my colleagues, I would say please proceed, okay?
We'll do. That's it.
All right. Any public comment? Anyone else who would like to make a public comment? Robert, you good? Okay, all right. Anyone online? Rose?
No one's online.
Okay, any comments from commissioners? Anything on your end?
Nope.
Nope, okay, all right. With that being said, meeting's adjourned.
So, Mr. Chairman, so I do this with the ZBA after the meeting's adjourned, so Rose doesn't have to.